Hey, good morning. It is Thursday morning. Look at all these beautiful lavenders. Can you tell what the subject is today? So I'm Sarah Smith. I'm a horticulturist here at Rogers Gardens, and I am bringing to you the plant of the week, which is usually what we do here on Thursdays. So it's usually something super special. It's something that we have a deal going on. It's something that we have a really great selection of different varieties on for you to choose from. So today's plant of the week is lavender. Everybody knows that we are going into a water restriction, right? By the way, I'm Sarah Smith. I don't know if I said that, horticulturist here at Rogers Gardens. But we are now heading into some water restrictions. It's already happening in in LA County. May be coming here to Orange County. Even if we don't get put on mandatory water restrictions, it's a good idea to really start thinking about how much water we use in our yards, how much water our yards really require. Most of us honestly are overwatering. That's a very, very common problem. A lot of the plants that we have could probably use a lot less water than we're giving them, and then we're giving them a little bit too much, and they're thriving off of that, but it's not totally necessary for them. So this is a plant that doesn't require a lot of water. So if you're looking at switching up an area to maybe put something in that's a little more drought tolerant, this is a great plant for that. Everybody loves lavender. It smells fantastic. Beautiful, beautiful flowers on it. There's a ton of different varieties of lavender, but I think a lot of people don't really understand how to care for lavender. They don't really understand what the different varieties are. So that's what I'm going to kind of demystify for you a little bit today. So lavenders are all very, very drought tolerant. They're something that definitely requires a good amount of sun. A lot of people try to put them in an area where they're not getting full sun and they're just not thriving very well. They get a little leggy, they get a little woody looking inside. That's when they start to kind of split and you see the inside of them and they're just not as pretty. So you definitely want to make sure that you're putting this in a full sun spot, something that preferably is getting 6 hours of sun, maybe even more, would be really, really great. They can handle some more shade, but that's when you're going to start getting a little bit more lanky looking lavenders. Think Italian hillside, right? That's the kind of look that they give you, and that's the kind of requirements that they want. They don't need a lot of water, but they definitely need a lot of good drainage. That is something that's very, very key for them as well, is something with very good drainage. So they do okay in pots. If you're going to put them in pots, I definitely suggest mixing regular potting soil with a little bit of cactus mix to give them that good drainage that you're looking for. If you're going to put them in the ground and you have an area that you know that you haven't amended in a very long time, it's an area that maybe stays very, very wet. It's an area that if it is wet, you go touch the soil and you can almost ball it up into your hands. That is not going to drain very well. So you need to put something in there to help with some of the drainage, and also maybe something to displace some of the salts, because it's probably built up a lot of salt there too. So gypsum works really well for that. And in fact, I forgot to bring a box and I meant to, but it comes in a box like this. It says gypsum on it, but that will help displace the salt. So putting that down will definitely help. And then even maybe amending that area as deeply and as widely as you can with some cactus mix, just to add some different textural differences to the soil. If you can ball up your soil in your hand when it's wet, that means the texture is all very fine and small. And that's what we don't want. Hardly any plant really honestly wants that. Some plants can tolerate it. Lavender definitely wants better drainage than that. So mixing that up and making that area really, really nice and well draining is definitely going to be helpful. All the different types of lavenders that we have going on here, there's English lavenders, French lavenders, Spanish lavenders, like everything in between, all these different hybrids. So a lot of times people come in and they go, I want French lavender. And there is a French lavender. The French lavender I have is right here. So this is French lavender. You can tell because it has this really pretty cool serrated kind of leaf to it. It's a very neat looking leaf. Flower is nice, big and fatty, very similar to the Spanish lavender. But there is also like lavender Provence and all these different things, and they look a little different than this. So this is the traditional one. So I say don't get hung up on if it's French or English or what it is. Go for what works in your garden and what looks pretty. They all have very similar requirements, which is really, really nice. This is an intermediate type, so this is an English hybrid. In the way you can tell, obviously from the name on the tag, but it's a thinner kind of thread leaf, lower tall stem. So it's really, really beautiful for that tall stem, which is really great. So that has that beautiful tall stem, whereas the Spanish has that big fatty flower, just like the French one does. I personally really like the Spanish lavender. It usually comes in really beautiful colors. I love that big kind of fatty caterpillar kind of little foliage to it. It looks like a little fatty caterpillar with a tiny little foliage on top. I just love that so much. It's really cute with the little petals like that. But this is a Spanish type. But then we have Goodwin Creeks, and we have them in all different sizes. We have them in 4-inch, we have them in 1 gallons, we have them in 5 gallons, so you can even buy them in 4-inch. So if you are patient and willing to start small, you can always get it small. This is Goodwin Creek. This is a very good traditional lavender that especially is super drought tolerant. You see this planted a lot. I've been to a couple of different gardens that different water districts have made to give examples of what is a good drought tolerant garden, and they're really shockingly beautiful. You walk into it thinking, okay, this is a drought tolerant garden, it's going to be all succulents, and it's not. There's all kinds of things that are beautifully drought tolerant and just so gorgeous. And the key with making things drought tolerant and really watering correctly is watering very deeply, but watering infrequently. So you want your water to penetrate your soil very, very deeply. So the roots of your plants, because at this point the roots of this plant is only this deep, right? But you want to water past the roots here. So you want these roots that are all compacted all right here to start searching down, 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 down. The more they search down, the better established your plant is going to be, the less water it's going to need, because the top of it, even if it dries out, is fine because most of the roots are down here, not up here. If you're watering shallow, all your roots are going to be high. So that's really the key with taking care of lavenders, is they're looking for that drought tolerant type of watering, where you water deeply and for a long period of time, and then you cut it off for quite a few days. A really good drought tolerant garden, you're probably only watering once a week, which is what the water restriction is going to be. So to get yourself there and get prepped for it, start watering longer. Check your irrigation boxes, look and see how often you're watering. If you're watering 3 times a week, cut it down to 2 times a week, but take the amount of minutes that you are watering, add it together and divide it by 2 and change it to that. That's going to help. And if you keep doing that, you will be able to get a more drought tolerant garden. Your plants will be happy. They might be a little shocked at first. You might see a little bit of wilting, but as long as they're not wilted for more than 24 hours, they will usually perk back up really fine, and they will get used to that, and they will send their roots down because they're smart enough to know, wow, I can't rely on surface watering. I gotta search down for lower ground water. That's also gonna make for a healthier plant too, which is really great. So lavender is really, really perfect for that. So Goodwin Creek is one of my favorites. It also has this really kind of cute serrated little flower, but more of, serrated leaf, but more of a long skinny stem on it, which is really beautiful. And really good for drying. I like this one and this one for drying. The fatty little flowers don't dry as well as the thin flowers do. The other one that I want to show you that I just think is beautiful, and we have them in 4-inch right now. We also have them in gallons. This is Platinum Blonde. Look at that. It's variegated. Isn't that pretty? Just imagine that mixed in with some other grays and all the different kind of textures and colors. But I absolutely love that. I think it would be really beautiful mixed in, because this is going to have a taller, thinner flower like this, but really beautifully mixed with something with that little fat flower. So it's kind of that fat, stocky one. And this is that tall, beautiful, lanky Platinum Blonde, which is just such a beautiful name for it. But I absolutely love this one. It's absolutely gorgeous. When it comes to pruning, a lot of people are a little confused about how to prune lavenders. This is often a question that I get asked. Oh, and I don't have my pruners on me. But when you're pruning them, once they're done with their last flush of flowers, where you can really kind of tell there's nothing new coming on, everything right now is really starting to come into bloom. I can see all these beautiful tiny little buds down in here. But if I'm starting to look at it, and you can deadhead it through the season to just keep it clean and tidy, meaning that you take something that looks like it's done and you just travel down along to the first set of foliage and you cut that off. So you're going to deadhead right here. Once you see that you don't have any new buds coming onto it, what you're going to do is you're going to take the whole thing and you're going to shear it down. So almost in a little globy ball kind of look. So you take the whole thing and you cut into the green only. don't cut into the wood. A lot of times people will cut them too deeply because they're almost thinking roses and they're thinking they're going to cut down into the wood. Don't cut down into the wood. You want to cut down into the green only. If the plant is starting to look woody, do not cut it there. Cut it right above that. And if you keep doing that, your shape will be a lot more tidy. You'll get more flowers. It won't get woody because you're keeping it sheared down. So the lower you're cutting it, but not to the wood, but just right above that into the green, the fuller and better and prettier your plant's going to be. If you just never trim it at all, what's going to happen is it's going to get really woody, and then about 3 or 4 years you're going to have to take it out and put a new one in, because it's just going to become kind of a woody monster and not look attractive anymore. So cut down into the green. So it's usually about 2/3 of the way down, maybe half of the way down, depending on how old it is. If you've never done that before, keep that in mind. When these are done flowering, that's what you're going to do to yours. So cut it. Oh, and look at the bee. The bees love the lavenders. So cut down into the greens, not down into the wood. Another good thing to do too is to give it a little bit of fertilizer, especially if you have a little bit more clay soil right after you cut it, to help it kind of push out a little more growth, so you're not looking at those kind of raggedy edges. So something like an all-purpose, they're not very heavy feeders. An all-purpose fertilizer works absolutely fine. They don't need anything too crazy strong. And the middle number, even on this all-purpose, is higher. That middle number is always for your flowers, of course. So this is a great one to give it as well. But yeah, perfect in pots, perfect in the ground. Smells gorgeous. Nothing smells like lavender. It just invokes such a great smell and memories. That smell memory comes into play with lavender for so many people. But it is something that I do find, even if you're really taking really good care of them, they're not a particularly long-lived perennial. It is something that even if you're shearing them really, really well, eventually it probably is going to need to be replaced, just because of the sheer woodiness that they tend to get, especially if you kind of neglected them in the beginning. So the better you treat them in the beginning, the longer you're going to have them, 10 years. The worse you treat them and you've never ever trimmed it and you've had it for 4 years, maybe another 3 or 4 years if you start trimming them. So it is definitely something you want to really stay on top of trimming wise. But of course this is live, so if you have any questions, I will answer all those questions for you. So stick those all down below there, and if we have anything already coming in, I'll answer those questions for you. If you came into this a little bit late, just put them down there and we will still get those answered for you a little bit later in the day today. So do we have any questions currently? Nice.
Yes, the first question is, what time of the year do you prune the lavender?
So it's usually at the end of the season. So usually fall typically is when you're going to see, but different ones are going to bloom on different seasons. Some are a little bit longer blooming, some are a little bit later blooming. So it depends on the variety you have. But what you're looking for, and when I look at this one, I can instantly tell this is definitely not even close to being done. And I'll do something that actually has true open flowers like these guys here. You're looking for the fact that the flowers are looking spent and you have no new little baby buds down inside. If you have no little baby buds down inside, time to shear. You can deadhead if these are starting to look bad. So it's always a good idea to start deadheading. You will start probably deadheading in summer because these ones will be done. By summertime, this flower is going to be done. It's going to be a little bit woody, so you're going to deadhead that. But you will notice that you still have buds down that stalk, and you'll see new little things coming up. So if you're still seeing new stuff come up, do not deadhead it, or don't shear it. I mean, go ahead and deadhead. You can always too, especially on something like this. This is the lace leaf lavender, which I didn't bring up. This is one of my other favorites. I really like lace leaf lavender. It's got a really pretty foliage. The body of the lavender tends to stay very low to the ground, whereas the flowers are very high. Sometimes what you can do with this one is you'll have a bunch of stuff up top that looks a little bad. If you haven't been really great about your deadheading, you can always kind of grab it, shear it, but don't shear too deep because you'll see these little things popping up here, but you can give it a cut here. So you're not going through and individually deadheading every single one, because that can take a lot of time. If you're not on top of it and you come out and go, yikes, this is looking bad, it might take a very long time to individually clean up one plant. So you can just pull the whole thing up, give it a little snip, just watch that you're not cutting some of these. You might sacrifice some of the babies just for the sake of ease. That does happen sometimes, but yeah, so for the sake of ease, you might need to do that. But usually it's like fall, winter, depending on the variety, is when you're going to give it that nice shear. Never shear down into the wood, always into the green still though.
Can you show one more time how far you should shear down?
Yeah, so if you're going to cut something like this, for example, and this is a good one because I've got some good height on it, you're going to look at where it's getting woody. So you're going to actually look down inside your plant and see where it's actually turning brown. This is a very young plant, so there is hardly any brown on it, but there is some. I would never cut down into the brown. Typical rule of thumb is 2/3 to 1/2 of the size of the plant. If you're looking at your plant and 2/3 of your plant is here, right? So I'm dividing it into 3 and I'm taking 2 bits of that 3 off. And that's about 2/3 of the plant. And this is where I would shear this young guy. I'd go pretty low because I'm looking at all my stems, and my stems of where I'm going to cut are still very, very green looking. I don't know if you can see that, but I can cut into this green part right here. If this part of the stem looks brown, don't cut down into it because that's going to be too much and it's not going to come back very nicely for you. So you usually want to do a half, depending on how old yours is and you've never sheared it, to about 2/3 down. And just always make sure that whatever you're cutting does not look brown, that it is actually green or gray. Really, these are more gray than green, right? But that actually has the same color almost as the leaf. So if the stem is the same color of the leaf, it's okay to cut there. But if the stem is a different color than the leaf, do not cut there because that's going to be too deep and it might not send out any new stuff, and you're going to get this totally ugly woody branch and nothing's going to come out from the bottom of that, and it's going to definitely change the shape of it. So never cut into anything brown is a good rule of thumb. 2/3 to a half down.
If a lavender has overgrown its pot, should I leave it or should I try to replant it into a bigger pot?
Yeah, it's totally up to you. It depends on what kind of project you want. I always say I'm slightly jaded from working in a nursery where I have such great access to plants. So there's certain plants I have, obviously, that are very sentimental to me that I'm always going to try to revive. But definitely they need fairly big pots as they start getting older. It is a little deceptive when you look at something like this and how tiny and little it is to begin with, to know that this plant's going to be 4x4 eventually down the road. They can get pretty big. So you can definitely bump it up into a higher pot. Make sure you're using a good potting soil that has very good drainage. So you're either using like a half and half potting soil cactus mix, even just total cactus mix. I use a lot of cactus mix in my pots very often. So that's always a good thing to make sure that the drainage is good. So you have good drainage there. But yeah, you can definitely bump it up. If it's still really nice shape and really beautiful, I would say keep it. Why are we going to get rid of it? If the shape's looking a little meh, and you're kind of like over it and you're ready for something new, which that's some kind of decision you'll have to make, I would say jump into something new. Or put it in the ground because they do really well in the ground as well.
Can you propagate lavender?
You can. I don't do a lot of propagation. You probably would need to use a rooting hormone for something like this. It's not going to be like propagating like a succulent piece or even an indoor house piece where you just like plop it in some water and it's going to grow some roots, because this is not something that will work that way. The way you would have to do this would be with some rooting hormones and a really good draining soil, totally like cactus mix, even with some more perlite in it, because if it's too wet, it's going to rot. But you could, with some rooting hormone and just a lot of patience and and need to propagate. But yeah, you absolutely could. It's something that you can do. So if you've got like a friend who has like a really cool variety or something that maybe it's like your grandmother's plant and you always want to have a part of that as well, which I think that's a lot of times when people coming in and they're propagating, they want to propagate something that is from a house maybe that they're selling and it's something that they really want, or it's a family member's plant. But I would definitely use rooting hormone, really good draining soil in that, and you're going to have to be really on top of the watering, but make sure that it's not staying wet. It's not something you can cut and, like a plectranthus or a house plant or a succulent and put in a little like shot glass of water. It's not going to grow roots. It's just going to rot is what's going to happen with that. So in soil only.
Will fertilizer help the lavender grow even if your soil is not great?
It will, absolutely. And if your soil's not great, what I would do is I would use some gypsum. People always think gypsum is for breaking up clay soil. It is and it isn't. It doesn't actually texturally change your soil. That's impossible for something like that that's a fine powder to do. But what it does do is it displaces the salts that tend to build up into clay soil. So put some of that gypsum on, and that will help displace that. That's really good for a lot of different plants, especially things that tend to be very salt sensitive, avocados and maples and things like that. So I would use a little bit of that, and then some fertilizer would be totally good too, to put on there. And just an all-purpose. It doesn't need to be anything super special. There's no special fertilizer for lavenders like there is for certain things like roses and citrus and avocados and things. But yeah, just an all-purpose would be great.
How much sun do they need?
Full sun. They're a full sun plant. So just always think like, what would an Italian Tuscany villa look like? That's what you're trying to do. So full sun, good drainage, you know, those Italian hillsides, rocky, beautifully draining soil. That's what you're looking for a lavender. So definitely full sun. They can tolerate some shade, but they're not going to be happy in that. And that's when you're going to get that woody kind of fall apart sort of look where it looks like it's actually like split in the middle. That's going to happen from either never being sheared ever and now it's just gotten too big and it's gotten too heavy, or from not having good enough sun. So you're looking for like 6 hours or more, really. So the better the sun, the happier they're going to be, the more compact and beautifully shaped they're going to be as well.
What is the best time of the year to harvest the flowers to use for gifts?
Oh, okay, yeah. So we're a little early on some of these, but it depends on how mature yours is because all these ones are fairly immature. It's a good time to start actually harvesting now, but you're looking for full color. So you're looking for some openness, like especially this is a really particularly nice variety. This is the Sensational, but it's the intermedia, so it's a English hybrid, but this is nice because you're looking for long stems. These ones not so much. I mean, for cutting and putting maybe in some floral arranging here and there, that's fine, but they don't really dry necessarily all that great. They can, but these ones are definitely dry a lot better. So the thinner stem, the thinner flower. So you're looking for some open flowers on the bottom. So if you look at each individual little piece here, they're going to have little bits that open up down here. So you want a little bit of open on there, so then that way they're bigger and fuller and plumper. And then when you dry them, you want to dry them in a very dry, non-humid area. So sometimes like pantries, I do a lot of drying of herbs and stuff in my pantry because it's got very good it's dark, it's cool, and it's not moist there. So you want to stay away from that kind of stuff. Some people will even dry things in like an oven, just because the oven tends to stay very dry, obviously inside, not turned on, but just drying it in a drying rack in an oven will work too. But hanging upside down is going to keep your shape a little bit nicer. So if you're looking for that really pretty shape, you want to hang it upside down instead of flat, because it'll kind of flatten down and you'll kind of almost be able to tell that it was dried in a flat situation instead of a hanging upside down situation. So someplace dry, someplace dark, you don't want direct sunlight on it, and then someplace that's not going to get too humid in that space. But that's a good time. It's a good area for drying.
When it gets really woody but has a lot of sun, can we shear it now or is it too late?
You can shear it now. That would be fine. You're probably going to lose out on some of the flowers, but don't shear too deep right now. If you're going to do a little bit of shearing, what I would do is maybe go a half. Don't do 2/3, maybe even do 1/3 down, just to kind of help and fertilize. If you're doing it right now, fertilize, and then just use that good all-purpose. Something like this would be great. But yeah, don't go 2/3 of the way down because it's just not going to be pretty for the rest of the season. And this is when we're really starting to get into the beautiful lavender season, and you won't miss out on that. But if you do it now, do it like right now, go now. And then come back and watch the video and then fertilize it, and only go maybe 1/3 to a half depending on how big and crazy yours is. But you will lose out on a little bit of the flower, but I think I would rather have a nice shaped plant than have flowers on something that's kind of an ugly monster in my garden. So yeah, that's totally fine. Yeah.
My plant is pale green. What is the best fertilizer to use?
So you want to do something that has a good amount of blood meal or something with some nitrogen in it. This one does have a good amount of nitrogen in it. You might need to use a little bit, something a little more heavy nitrogen, but chances are, if it's pale green, it's because your drainage is really bad, or you're overwatering. That is very, very common. So it's gone a little chlorotic, and chlorotic means it's lacking nitrogen, and lacking nitrogen is usually from bad soil, under fertilizing, or overwatering, because you're pushing all the good nutrients and stuff out of that area, or it's staying too wet so that can be the problem. So check for what you've got going on there. Cut back that water some. A little bit of nitrogen would be fine, and all-purpose would be fine. A straight bone meal would be fine, or sorry, blood meal would be fine. Not too much. You don't want to go crazy. You can burn with too much blood meal, I've found.
Can you just hold up the fertilizer?
Yeah.
And say the name again?
Yeah. This is the Down to Earth all-purpose fertilizer. Down to Earth is the company that we carry for all the dry fertilizers. We sell them in big boxes. We sell them in little boxes as well. But Down to Earth is great. It's Omni rated, which is the highest classification for an organic fertilizer that you can possibly get. We sell this in the rose and in the citrus and all different kinds of varieties. Okay, thanks so much for tuning in. Be well and be safe and happy gardening.